Ladies and gentlemen, history is moving faster than ever before. The world is changing in ways no one can ignore, and no one, not even Donald Trump, can stop it. Because here's the truth, the old games of power, the old tricks of fear, and the old weapons of division no longer hold the same sway. The people are waking up, nations are shifting, and the balance of power is no longer tilted toward one man or one country. Trump built his legacy on anger, on disruption, and on domination. But what he cannot control, what will truly shake him, is the undeniable rise of a new order that demands cooperation, truth, and accountability. So when he realizes that the world is no longer bending to his will, when he sees that people are no longer falling for the same manipulation, when he understands that the very foundations of global politics are shifting beneath his feet, that is when the meltdown begins. Because no man, no matter how powerful, can stop the future. The shift of global power is the most important transformation of our age, and it is unfolding before our eyes in ways that even the most dominant figures of American politics struggle to understand. For decades, the United States stood at the center of global affairs, not only militarily, but also economically and culturally. Washington set the terms of trade, dictated the frameworks of security alliances, and presented itself as the indispensable nation. But those days of unchallenged primacy are slipping away, and they are slipping away fast. What is taking shape now is a multipolar world, a world where power is not concentrated in the hands of one country, nor defined by the personality of one leader, but dispersed across regions and civilizations, each with its own voice, its own vision, and its own rising influence. This is the truth that so many in the American political establishment refuse to confront, and it is the truth that will leave someone like Donald Trump utterly confounded. In the past, Trump's worldview rested on the notion that America could push others around, impose tariffs, threaten sanctions, and in doing so, bend global events to his liking. That worked for a short time when other countries felt they had little choice but to comply. But look at the world now. China has grown into a global economic powerhouse with technological innovation and industrial capacity that rivals, and in some cases surpasses, the United States. India has surged forward as one of the fastest growing major economies, asserting itself not as a follower but as an independent actor with its own agenda. Russia, despite sanctions, continues to wield significant influence in energy markets and security arrangements. Across Africa, nations are building new alliances that look east as much as west. Latin America is seeking greater autonomy from Washington's dictate. Even Europe, America's traditional partner, increasingly insists on pursuing its own strategic interests rather than automatically falling in line with U.S. policies. This is the new reality, a reality of diverse power centers, interconnected economies, and shared decision-making. What this means is that no single nation can dominate the future. The old unipolar order is gone, and the new multipolar system is here to stay. This change is not only about economics or military capabilities, it is about legitimacy and influence. Countries around the world are asking why a small elite in Washington should determine the fate of billions. They are rejecting the idea that one man's whims, whether it be Trump or anyone else, can dictate the course of global trade, climate action, or technological development. Nations are building their own platforms, forming regional institutions, and demanding that their voices be heard. This diffusion of power is not chaos, it is balance. It reflects a more equitable distribution of influence, one that acknowledges the dignity and aspirations of people everywhere. For Trump, this is the ultimate nightmare. His entire political persona thrives on dominance, on the idea that America is number one, that he is the strong man who can dictate terms, that others must either obey or face punishment. But how can such a strategy survive when the very structure of the world no longer permits it? How can a bully sustain power when the playground itself has changed, when there are too many players, too many alliances, and too many alternatives to American dictate? Trump will rage against this reality, but his rage will not change it. His threats of tariffs will be met with counter alliances. His boasts of military superiority will be checked by the fact that wars in the modern world create devastation without victory. His attempts to coerce will backfire as others turn to different partners who offer respect rather than intimidation. Consider the economic dimension. Trump built his image around the idea of America first, assuming that the U.S. market was so indispensable that everyone would bend to American rules. But today, global trade networks do not flow exclusively through the United States. Asia has built its own regional trade agreements. The Belt and Road Initiative has connected dozens of countries through infrastructure investment and shared projects that bypass Washington's approval. New financial institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the BRICS New Development Bank offer alternatives to the U.S.-dominated IMF and World Bank. The dollar, once seen as unassailable, now faces challenges from efforts to settle trade in local currencies. This does not mean the United States is irrelevant, but it does mean it is no longer the sole gatekeeper of global commerce. That shift is profound, and it leaves little room for Trump's old tactics of economic coercion. Equally important is the technological transformation. In the past, American companies dominated the internet, social media, and advanced industries. But look at the landscape now. Chinese firms lead in 5G, renewable energy technologies, and increasingly in artificial intelligence. India has become a global hub for digital innovation. Europe is setting standards in data privacy and regulation that affect the whole world. This dispersion of technological leadership makes it impossible for Trump or any American leader to dictate the rules unilaterally. The very idea of American monopoly over innovation has dissolved, replaced by a web of global competition and cooperation. And with this comes the recognition that no single country can control the pace or direction of the next industrial revolution. The strategic implications are just as dramatic. Trump often boasted about the size of the U.S. military, using it as a blunt instrument of intimidation. Yet the wars of the past 2 decades revealed the limits of military power. Afghanistan ended in failure despite 20 years of occupation. Iraq left a trail of instability rather than security. Libya and Syria showed how interventions breed chaos without resolution. Meanwhile, other nations are developing capabilities that ensure the United States cannot act with impunity. Russia, China, Iran, and others have shown that regional powers can push back. This does not mean a world of endless conflict. It means a world where balance of power enforces caution, where no one can simply impose their will. Trump's illusion of America as an all-powerful enforcer collapses under this reality. The most important element of this global shift is not only about governments, but about people. Across continents, societies are demanding sovereignty, respect, and equality. They are tired of being treated as pawns in someone else's game. They are asserting cultural pride, economic independence, and political agency. This popular awakening aligns with the structural changes of multipolarity, reinforcing the fact that no single leader, no matter how loud or domineering, can override the aspirations of billions. Trump may try to bluster his way through this new world, but he cannot silence the voices of nations rising in confidence and self-determination. And so when Trump comes face to face with this truth, when he realizes that the levers of control he once thought he could pull no longer move the machinery of the world, he will react in the only way he knows how, with fury, with denial, with the theater of meltdown. But beneath the noise, his powerlessness will be exposed. Because the era of one man, one country, one ideology dominating the globe is over. The shift of global power is permanent, unstoppable, and irreversible. The world has entered a new chapter, and Trump, whether he likes it or not, will have to watch as the stage he once thought he owned is now shared by many. The decline of fear politics is one of the defining shifts of our era, and it strikes at the very core of Donald Trump's political identity. For years, his strategy has been built on cultivating fear, fear of immigrants, fear of foreign nations, fear of decline, fear of anyone deemed other. He has wielded fear as both a weapon and a shield, using it to rally supporters and silence critics. Yet the world is beginning to outgrow this tactic. People are increasingly aware of how fear is manipulated, how it distorts reality, and how it serves narrow interests rather than the common good. What once seemed like a potent force to mobilize voters is losing its effectiveness. The politics of fear is not dead, but it is weakening, and its decline marks a profound turning point for democracies everywhere. Fear has long been a central instrument of political power. Leaders throughout history have invoked threats, real or imagined, to consolidate authority. In the United States, the Cold War was framed around the fear of communism. After 9/11, fear of terrorism was used to justify wars, surveillance, and the erosion of civil liberties. Trump tapped into this lineage, but with his own brand of theatrical excess. He exaggerated dangers, portrayed immigrants as invaders, branded entire nations as enemies, and cast political opponents as existential threats. His message was simple: you should be afraid, and only I can protect you. For a time, this resonated with a segment of the population. But the longer such fear is invoked without resolution, the more hollow it begins to sound. The public today is more informed and connected than ever before. Social media, global communication, and access to independent journalism mean that fear-based narratives are more easily challenged. When Trump described migrant caravans as an invasion, millions saw with their own eyes the images of families seeking safety, not soldiers storming a border. When he portrayed foreign nations as villains, people could directly access perspectives from those very countries, undermining the caricatures. The democratization of information has weakened the monopoly on fear. It has not eradicated disinformation, but it has ensured that fear cannot go unchallenged. And once fear is questioned, its power begins to crumble. Another factor eroding fear politics is generational change. Younger people, especially in the United States, but also around the world, are far less receptive to fear-driven rhetoric. They are more diverse, more global in their outlook, and less willing to accept simplistic narratives of us versus them. Many of them grew up amid the failures of wars fought in the name of fear, watching trillions spent on endless conflicts while domestic needs went unmet. They are skeptical of leaders who promise security by sowing division. Instead, they are drawn to politics that speaks of opportunity, inclusion, and global cooperation. For Trump, whose entire persona thrives on casting shadows, this generational shift represents a profound weakness. His politics appeals to nostalgia, but the future is being written by those who are not afraid. Economics also plays a role in diminishing fear. For decades, fear politics was tied to promises of protection against job loss, against foreign competition, against societal change. But in reality, fear-based policies have not delivered security. They have often deepened insecurity. Trade wars harmed American farmers and manufacturers rather than protecting them. Anti-immigrant crackdowns disrupted industries reliant on labor while doing nothing to solve structural problems. Militarized rhetoric drained resources without addressing the root causes of global challenges. As people see the gap between fear-driven promises and tangible outcomes, they become disillusioned. Fear no longer guarantees loyalty when it is repeatedly exposed as ineffective. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a revealing case study. Trump tried to downplay the virus at times and inflame fear at others, alternating between denial and scapegoating. He cast blame on China, attacked scientists, and accused political opponents of exaggerating the crisis. Yet ordinary citizens saw the reality with their own eyes. Overwhelmed hospitals, lost loved ones, disrupted livelihoods. In this context, Trump's reliance on fear tactics rang hollow. Fear could not substitute for competence. It could not solve the crisis. In fact, fear-mongering worsened the divisions and undermined the collective action needed to confront the pandemic. The lesson was clear: in moments of genuine danger, politics based solely on manufactured fear is exposed as empty. Globally, the same trend is visible around the world. People are increasingly rejecting leaders who rule through fear. They are recognizing that fear politics locks societies into cycles of division, preventing progress on urgent issues like climate change, inequality, and technological transformation. Fear isolates, cooperation unites. Fear breeds paralysis. Hope fuels action. In many countries, leaders who offer constructive visions are gaining strength against those who rely solely on demonizing others. This shift does not mean fear has vanished, but it means fear no longer commands automatic obedience. And for someone like Trump, whose political instinct is to amplify fear at every turn, this is a devastating development. Psychologically, fear works best when people feel powerless. When they feel they have no agency, they cling to strongmen who promise protection. But the more people are empowered through education, participation, and connectivity, the less effective fear becomes. Empowered citizens demand solutions, not scapegoats. They see through attempts to distract them with artificial threats. They recognize when their anxieties are being manipulated. This growing empowerment erodes the foundations of fear politics. It shifts the balance away from those who thrive on division and toward those who can inspire trust and confidence. For Trump, the decline of fear politics will be a personal undoing. His charisma does not rest on detailed policy or thoughtful vision. It rests on the performance of crisis, on keeping people anxious, angry, and divided. Without fear, his stage collapses. He may still try to invent new enemies, to conjure new dangers, but as society becomes less susceptible to such manipulation, his words will sound like echoes of an old script, increasingly disconnected from reality. His base may still cheer, but the broader world will move on. And nothing unsettles a man like Trump more than irrelevance. The larger point is that politics built on fear is unsustainable in a world that requires cooperation to survive. Climate change cannot be confronted through division. It demands collective effort. Pandemics cannot be managed through scapegoating. They require global solidarity. Economic stability cannot be secured through isolation. It requires interconnectedness. These truths are becoming ever more visible. And as they become visible, the spell of fear is broken. People recognize that their real security lies not in walls or weapons, but in collaboration, knowledge, and trust. So when Trump realizes that the very tool he has relied on, the politics of fear, is losing its grip, it will strike at his core. He has no alternative narrative, no constructive vision to fall back on. He has no language of unity or hope. He has only fear, and when fear loses its hold, he loses his power. This is why he will melt down, because the decline of fear politics is not just a shift in public mood, it is a structural transformation of the political landscape. It signals a world less willing to be manipulated, more willing to demand genuine leadership. It marks the end of an era where shouting about enemies could substitute for governing. The decline of fear politics is the rise of accountability, the rise of truth, and the rise of courage. It is the sign of a maturing global society that sees through the old tricks and seeks something better. And in that world, Trump's bluster is nothing more than noise, drowned out by the quiet determination of people who refuse to be afraid. The rise of cooperation is perhaps the most hopeful and transformative development of our time, and it stands in stark contrast to the divisive politics that Donald Trump represents. For too long, the international stage has been dominated by conflict, rivalry, and the zero-sum assumption that one nation's gain must mean another nation's loss. Trump embodies that worldview. His America First doctrine was not a call to collaboration, but to confrontation. He reduced global affairs to a crude competition, where tariffs, threats, and insults replaced diplomacy and partnership. Yet beneath the noise of such nationalism, something much more profound is happening. The world is learning, slowly but unmistakably, that cooperation is not only desirable, but essential for survival. The future is being shaped not by those who shout the loudest about domination, but by those who quietly build bridges across borders, across cultures, and across divides. At the heart of this transformation is the recognition that humanity's greatest challenges cannot be solved by any single nation. Climate change, pandemics, digital security, financial stability, and mass migration are issues that transcend boundaries. No wall can keep out rising seas, no tariff can shield against a virus, no unilateral decree can stabilize global markets or stop the consequences of ecological collapse. These are problems of interconnectedness, and their solutions require interconnectedness too. This simple but profound truth has been dawning on nations and peoples around the globe. Cooperation is not a luxury, it is a necessity, and this is precisely why Trump, with his instinct to divide and isolate, finds himself so out of step with the times. Consider the climate crisis. While Trump denied its reality, pulled out of international agreements, and mocked renewable energy, the rest of the world was moving forward. The Paris Agreement was not perfect, but it represented a collective acknowledgement that climate change could only be addressed through shared responsibility. Nations from Europe to Asia to Africa invested in green energy, shared technologies, and set ambitious targets. Even U.S. states, cities, and corporations refused to follow Trump's retreat. They formed their own coalitions to reduce emissions and cooperate with global partners. The world simply bypassed his obstruction. This is the essence of the rise of cooperation. When one leader clings to denial and division, others step forward together, refusing to be held back. The same dynamic emerged during the COVID-19 pandemic. While Trump turned the crisis into a stage for blame and political posturing, much of the world recognized the necessity of scientific collaboration. International research networks raced to sequence the virus, share data, and develop vaccines. Initiatives like COVAX were created to distribute doses across nations. However imperfectly, medical professionals exchanged knowledge across borders in real time, saving lives through cooperation rather than competition. The pandemic laid bare the futility of isolationist thinking. A virus does not respect national boundaries, and neither does the knowledge required to defeat it. Cooperation proved to be the only real defense, even as Trump's divisiveness left his country unprepared and fractured. Economic interdependence also demonstrates the rise of cooperation. Global supply chains may face strains, but they remain the backbone of modern prosperity. Nations cannot simply sever ties without inflicting damage on themselves. Despite Trump's rhetoric of decoupling and trade wars, businesses and consumers alike understand that prosperity depends on networks of exchange. Countries are learning to strengthen regional partnerships, negotiate fairer terms, and diversify relationships, not by retreating into isolation, but by broadening cooperation. The rise of new regional trade agreements in Asia, Africa's growing continental free trade area, and cross-border digital innovation hubs are all signs of a world deepening its ties rather than cutting them. Technology underscores this same truth. Artificial intelligence, renewable energy, medical breakthroughs, and space exploration are fields too vast and complex for any one country to master alone. Collaborative ventures, from international space stations to global data sharing initiatives, highlight how progress accelerates when knowledge is pooled. The internet itself, despite attempts at censorship or fragmentation, remains a symbol of interconnected humanity. Trump's approach, which sought to weaponize technology wars, could not stop the reality that scientists, engineers, and innovators increasingly work in global communities. Cooperation is embedded in the very structure of modern discovery. Even in geopolitics, where rivalry has traditionally defined relations, cooperation is asserting itself in new ways. The expansion of multilateral forums, the strengthening of regional organizations, and the pursuit of collective problem solving are creating a more balanced global order. The BRICS nations are expanding cooperation on finance and development. The European Union continues to prove that integration brings resilience. African states are strengthening continental institutions to confront shared challenges. These initiatives do not eliminate conflict, but they do create structures where dialogue and collaboration become the norm. They remind us that nations gain more through shared progress than through endless confrontation. Trump's disdain for such institutions only underscored how deeply he misunderstood this evolution. Social movements also embody the rise of cooperation. Young people across borders are connecting through climate activism, human rights campaigns, and digital communities. They are building alliances that bypass the old boundaries of nationality and ideology. When Trump sought to pit Americans against one another and against the world, young activists were organizing global climate strikes, connecting online to amplify voices from every continent. This is cooperation at the grassroots level, where solidarity is not negotiated by governments but created by citizens who recognize their shared humanity. The rise of cooperation is not a naive fantasy. It does not deny that nations have interests, that conflicts exist, or that power still matters. But it insists that the logic of survival and progress favors collaboration over hostility. Even rivals find it necessary to cooperate on issues like arms control, health security, or environmental management. The more complex the challenge, the more obvious it becomes that no one can stand alone. Trump's brand of politics, which glorifies unilateralism and mocks global engagement, crumbles against this truth. His worldview is obsolete, a relic of an era when leaders imagined that domination was sustainable. The 21st century is proving otherwise. For Trump, cooperation represents a direct threat to his style of leadership. His power depends on division, pitting Americans against foreigners, insiders against outsiders, one group against another. Cooperation dissolves those divisions. It shows that people can unite across boundaries for shared goals. It reveals the futility of fear and the strength of solidarity, and it exposes Trump as a man fighting against the tide of history, a man clinging to conflict while the world learns to build peace. The ultimate irony is that cooperation delivers the very security and prosperity that fear politics pretends to offer. A world working together on climate will be safer from catastrophe. A world collaborating on health will be stronger against pandemics. A world cooperating economically will be more prosperous and resilient. The benefits of cooperation are real, tangible, and measurable. They improve lives. They create hope. They inspire confidence. They build the kind of future that cannot be created by walls, tariffs, or threats. And so, when Trump realizes that the world is moving forward without him, when he sees nations linking arms, societies joining hands, and people choosing cooperation over division, his rage will be inevitable because he will know deep down that his politics has no place in this new reality. The stage on which he thrived, built on fear and conflict, is being dismantled. In its place is a new stage, one where cooperation is the driving force. And in such a world, Trump is not a leader. He is an artifact, a reminder of the very politics humanity is leaving behind. The inevitability of change is the deepest truth of human history, and it is the one truth that Donald Trump is least able to accept. His entire persona is built on the illusion of permanence, on the idea that he can freeze the world in place, that his power, his slogans, his nostalgic vision of America can hold back the forces of transformation. But the march of change cannot be stopped. It is written into the fabric of society, into the dynamics of technology, into the shifting tides of demography, and into the growing consciousness of humanity. The attempt to deny change, to rage against it, is not only futile, it is self-destructive. And when Trump realizes that the changes he most fears are unstoppable, it will not just frustrate him, it will undo him.
Change is inevitable because the world itself is in motion. Economies evolve as new industries rise and old ones fade. Demographics shift as younger generations replace older ones, bringing with them new values and perspectives. Technologies reshape how we work, communicate, and even think about what it means to be human. Climate change, driven by centuries of industrial activity, is altering ecosystems and weather patterns, forcing societies to adapt. Politics itself transforms as people demand greater accountability, justice, and representation. None of these changes can be frozen in time. They may be slowed, resisted, or distorted, but they cannot be stopped.
Trump's politics has always been about resisting change. Make America Great Again was not a policy program. It was a cry to rewind history, to restore a past that never truly existed, to halt the transformations that were unsettling for many. It was nostalgia weaponized into political rhetoric. But nostalgia is not strategy. The world of the 1950s cannot be recreated. The coal mines will not reopen on a mass scale. The factories will not return in the same form. The white male-dominated political order that once seemed permanent has been transformed by movements for civil rights, gender equality, and cultural diversity. Trump's promise to restore a vanished past was doomed from the beginning because history moves forward, not backward. Technology is one of the clearest drivers of inevitable change. Automation, artificial intelligence, and renewable energy are reshaping economies. Trump could rail against wind turbines. He could mock electric cars. He could promise to protect fossil fuels, but the arc of innovation does not bend to his rhetoric. The cost of renewable energy keeps falling, making it increasingly the rational choice for governments and businesses worldwide. Artificial intelligence is advancing whether or not he acknowledges it, transforming industries and creating new opportunities while displacing old jobs. Global connectivity is expanding through the internet, linking societies in ways that cannot be undone. These changes carry challenges, but they also bring enormous potential. To deny them, as Trump so often tried to do, is to deny reality itself. Demographic change is another force beyond his control. The United States is becoming more diverse, more multicultural, and more globally connected with each passing decade. Younger generations, shaped by the realities of climate change, digital communication, and global interdependence, do not share the fears or resentments that Trump exploits. They are less interested in walls and more interested in bridges. They do not see globalization as a threat in the same way older generations do. They see it as the world they already inhabit. Trump may try to stoke resentment about these demographic shifts, but he cannot reverse them. They are as unstoppable as the passage of time. Globally, the inevitability of change is even more pronounced. The rise of Asia, the growing influence of Africa, the technological leadership emerging in multiple regions all point to a redistribution of global power. The world is no longer centered on the United States, and certainly not on the personality of one American politician. Multipolarity is not a future to be debated, it is a present reality. Trump's attempts to assert unilateral dominance, to force others into submission, clash against this irreversible trend. The United States remains powerful, but it is now one power among many, part of a global system in which cooperation, negotiation, and respect are necessary for stability. Environmental change underscores the futility of denial. The planet is warming, sea levels are rising, extreme weather is intensifying. These are not possibilities. They are realities observed by scientists and experienced by communities worldwide. Trump's insistence on dismissing climate change did not slow its advance. His withdrawal from international agreements did not cool the planet by a single fraction of a degree. Nature does not negotiate with political slogans. It moves according to physical laws, indifferent to ideology. Societies must adapt, and they are adapting through renewable energy, sustainable practices, and global frameworks for environmental action. Trump's refusal to face this truth placed him outside the flow of history, shouting against a current that cannot be stopped. Even culture itself is transformed by inevitability. Ideas spread faster than ever before. Social movements that once took decades to build can now gather global momentum in weeks. The struggle for racial justice, for gender equality, for LGBTQ rights, for indigenous recognition, all are advancing despite fierce resistance. Trump positioned himself as a defender of the old hierarchies, mocking or opposing these movements. But their progress is not dependent on his approval. They are fueled by the lived experiences of millions and amplified by new forms of communication. Cultural change may provoke backlash, but it cannot be reversed. It is propelled by the universal human demand for dignity. For Trump, the inevitability of change is intolerable because it strips away his illusion of control. His brand of politics depends on the idea that he alone can fix things, that he can bend history to his will, that he can dictate outcomes through force of personality. But change exposes the limits of his power. It reveals that the forces shaping our world are far larger than him, larger than any single leader. His threats cannot silence technological progress. His anger cannot reverse demographic trends. His denial cannot stop climate science. His nostalgia cannot resurrect a past that has vanished. Faced with this reality, his response is always the same: to rage louder, to double down on denial, to escalate the theater of resistance. But deep down, he must know that he is fighting a losing battle against time itself. This is why his eventual meltdown is inevitable, when he realizes that no amount of bluster can halt the transformation of the world, when he sees that the levers he once pulled have lost their effect, when he confronts the truth that history is moving on without him. His political persona collapses, because without the illusion of control, without the pretense of dominance, what remains? He cannot lead a world that demands adaptation, cooperation, and innovation. He can only shout into the storm, powerless to change its course. And yet, for humanity, the inevitability of change is a source of hope. It means that the old structures of domination can be dismantled. It means that new voices can rise. It means that progress, though uneven and contested, cannot be permanently suppressed. Change carries risk, but it also carries possibility. It opens doors to new solutions, new forms of solidarity, new ways of imagining the future. While Trump clings to the past, the rest of the world is already stepping into that future, building it day by day. The inevitability of change is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. It is the recognition that humanity is not static, that we are capable of growth, learning, and renewal. The world does not belong to those who try to freeze it in place. It belongs to those who are willing to evolve with it. Trump will melt down in the face of this truth, but others will rise stronger because they understand it. They know that the tide of history cannot be stopped, but it can be guided. It cannot be reversed, but it can be harnessed for the common good. This is the lesson of our time, and it is the reason why the politics of denial will fade while the politics of progress will endure.